Hi teachers, my name is Sarah Smith. Welcome back to Lead to Teach and welcome back to part 2 of the Crystal Clear Classroom, where we're going to continue talking about how to set behavioral expectations in your classroom. Remember that you can download guided notes for free at leadtoteach.com if you want to fill something out as we go through the content, but I want to jump right in with the why of crystal clear expectations. So let me give you an example. Ready? A couple of years ago, I had a chance to visit a couple of kindergarten classrooms just a day apart from each other. And this was early in the year. And in classroom 1, what happened was the teacher said to her kids, her 5-year-olds, "Okay, students, go ahead and quietly meet me at the rug. Go." and that was all they got. They got one sentence stating how that transition should look. And even though she had said, "Quietly meet me at the rug," the transition was anything but quiet, as kids stood up and started running and tackling and pushing and falling and crying on their way to the rug. So by the time they were actually seated and she was actually able to start calendar, that transition took just over 4 minutes. And the disruption level, mild, moderate, or severe, was severe. You're not surprised to hear that, right? Most of the kids engaging in some form of disruption during that transition. Okay, so then the next day I have the chance to go into another classroom, still a group of kindergartners, still the beginning of the year, but this is what the teacher said for this very same transition, moving from seats to the rug for calendar. She said, "Kinders," isn't that so cute that she calls them kinders? I love that. She said, "Kinders, in just a minute, you're going to meet me at the rug." And then she paused to allow time for processing. "When you do this, you'll stand up quietly and you'll push in your chair. Your mouth will be closed. Your feet will walk over to your spot on the rug," and they all had assigned spots on the rug. "You'll walk over to your spot on the rug. You'll sit with your hands in your lap and your mouth will still be closed." And then she even did a check for understanding by saying, "Point for me, where are you going to walk?" And notice that she folded in the word walk with that check for understanding. "Point for me, where are you going to walk?" And they all pointed to the rug area. "Show me, what will your mouth look like as you do this?" And they all looked at her with a quiet mouth. "That's perfect. You may stand up, push in your chairs, go." And you could have heard a pin drop. Despite these 30-ish kids moving over to the rug, they were going so quietly and so smoothly. It was incredible. So how much time did this transition take before kids were seated and ready for instruction? Just over 30 seconds. And what was the disruption level? Mild, moderate, severe, or none? It was none. She didn't have a single disruption during that transition. And in my opinion, it comes down to how explicit the teachers were with their expectations. It's not that the teacher in classroom 1 had a much harder dynamic of kids. I think they had an equally difficult dynamic, having spent more time in both classrooms that year. I think it had everything to do with the language of the teachers and how clear they were about how they wanted the transition to look. So I'm coming back to Randy Sprick, right? He's our favorite educational and behavioral researcher. He has said, see if you remember this, teaching behavioral expectations is as important as teaching blank subjects. Do you remember what he said? Teaching academic subjects. In other words, it is just as important that you train your kids how you want them to act as it is that you teach them the academic content for which you were hired. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we give behavioral management the same time as academic content, but we're just as intentional about it. We're just as mindful of it as we are about the academic subjects. Okay, so you might recall from last session, we said, first things first, you want to teach and establish your classroom rules, right? I want to teach kids to follow directions, raise their hand to speak, take care of property, and show respect to each other. That's the first thing. But you might remember we asked this question at the end, what else do you train besides the classroom rules? And the answer was transitions. So let's first define what a transition is. A transition is any time students are expected to shift from one task or activity to another. Much like we as adult drivers transition on the road all the time. Sometimes we're turning a left corner, sometimes we're turning right, sometimes we're going up a hill or down a hill, sometimes we're accelerating, sometimes we're putting on the brakes, we're moving from neutral to drive to reverse to park. We're constantly transitioning as we're driving, and the same holds true in a classroom. There are constant shifts in tasks or activities that the students are expected to perform. So why give special attention to transitions? Knowing that that's what they are, why give special attention to them within the realm of setting clear expectations? And the first reason is because it's the area where students are most likely to become disruptive. Transitions tend to be times where there's not a lot of structure, there's not a lot of task other than completing the transition. So it tends to be a time where students can begin engaging in conversation and off-task behavior, and it tends to be the most disruptive part of a school day. Why else give special attention to transitions? Will this surprise you? This shocked me when I first read this, is because transitions comprise up to 24% of a school day. 24% of a school day. That's so wild to me that a quarter of our school day could be devoted just to transitions, especially if our transitions are lengthy, right? And how is that even possible? How is it even possible that transitions could take that much time? Because again, we're going back to the definition of it. A transition is any time students are expected to shift from one task or activity to another. So leaving the classroom, that's a transition. We're shifting tasks or activities here. Entering the classroom, that's another transition. Moving from our seats to the rug, or passing out papers, handing in papers, putting papers away, maybe in folders or in mailboxes or cubbies, whatever. Taking out books, parking your pencils, getting a drink. Anytime we need to shift any of our activities within a classroom, we are transitioning. Before I move from this slide, just looking at it reminded me, my cute mom saw me when I was working on it, and she kind of looked over my shoulder and she said, well, I mean, I like it, except it's really hard to read what you've written down at the bottom there. Maybe you want to make that bigger. And I kind of chuckled and I was like, no, that's the point, Mom, is that there's so many transitions in a day that we can't even think about them all. We can't even make a comprehensive list of how many times we transition. There's too many to even see. Get it? Okay, but here's what I often hear teachers say in relation to transitions. They say, well, I want my students to like me. I want them to like me as a teacher, and I want them to like school. I want them to enjoy coming here, and I want them to like each other and be friends with each other. Therefore, I have to let them talk during downtime, or in other words, during transitions when there's not an academic task at hand. But I want to ask you just to think about for a second which word on this page, which word within this statement makes the statement false. If you had to pick one, which word makes the statement false? And wouldn't it be the word therefore? The idea that in order for students to like you or school or each other, you have to let them talk. The idea that this depends on this, that's absolutely false. And the reason I have a picture of my cute daughter here with her kindergarten teacher, whom we both just adore, is because she is the epitome of this idea. This is Miss Renee. Miss Renee is just beloved by all who know her. Everybody just adores Miss Renee. I've never heard anybody say an ill word against her. And you might be surprised that when you go into her classroom, that she runs a tight ship. If she says that she wants the kids to line up quickly, they line up quickly. If she says push in your chairs, do it without talking, they do it without talking. She has very, very high behavioral expectations for her students, but she's incredibly warm and nurturing and approachable and personable. So this idea that if we want our students to like us and to like school and to like each other, we have to let them talk is absolutely false. Not only according to research, but also based on my own experience with this beloved teacher that my daughter had in kindergarten. Can we talk for just a second about the outcomes of noisy transitions? What does the research tell us are the harms of noisy transitions? Here's the first one. You're not surprised, is that instructional time is lost. We lose instructional time if we let the kids talk during transitions. Some research I did back in 2016 found that noisy transitions take up to 4 times longer than quiet ones. So in this study that I had done, the only change that we made with this particular group of kids is we told them that they had to complete the recess to classroom transition quietly. You're not allowed to talk to your neighbors. So previously this transition had been taking on average 12 minutes a day. And when we implemented that expectation that, nope, you're going to do it quietly, You're not going to talk. We didn't address any other problem behaviors. We just said your mouths are closed. We went from 12 minutes down to 3 minutes just by virtue of eliminating the conversation. I mean, that's incredible, especially times 3 recesses a day. Think about how much instructional time you gain across a day and across a week. Classrooms that transition quietly yield, on average, 2 hours of additional instruction time per week than classrooms that transition noisily. And that aligns not only with research I've done, but with research that others have done as well. Okay, second outcome of a noisy transition is that teachers tend to increase their number of corrections. Which, does that surprise you? Because a lot of times the reason teachers tell me that they want their kids to talk during transitions is because they want them to like the teacher and like school and like each other. So that seems kind of ironic then that another outcome of noisy transitions is that teachers begin to correct more. The research specifically says that teachers in poorly managed classrooms are more likely to have negative attitudes toward and interactions with their students. So even though maybe I'm letting them talk in the name of being more likable, I actually end up reprimanding more, probably because I realize I'm losing so much instructional time. Okay, the third outcome of a noisy transition, I'm going to give you 5 here, so this is number 3 of 5, is that administrators, principals, directors are more likely to evaluate a class as off-task and poorly managed. And it's interesting to me that this is the number one reason I'm called in as an instructional coach to support teachers is because of noisy transitions, where principals will say, oh, they're just having such a hard time walking down the hall. They're having such a hard time coming in from recess. I've never yet seen where a class was super, super noisy and disruptive during a transition and then completely 100% on task and attentive during instruction. I just don't see it. Those behaviors seem to be incompatible with each other. So it's the number one reason I, as a coach, am called in to support teachers, is because administrators evaluate classrooms that transition noisily as being poorly managed. Okay, number 4, fourth outcome of noisy transitions is that parents are more likely to complain that the class lacks structure. So this might not seem like such a big deal at first, but if you know how fast gossip travels and rumors spread, I've seen teachers really, really quickly be blacklisted because parents will kind of form an alliance against them and say, oh, you don't want this teacher. Her classroom is so noisy. My child had so much anxiety in that setting, on and on and on. I had a chance once to go through teacher request forms with a principal to help place kids in different classrooms with different teachers. And what was interesting to me is that the number one request on those teacher forms was that parents said they wanted a teacher who was 2 things: warm and structured. In other words, I want you to love my child, I want you to be compassionate toward them, but I also want it to be a structured environment where they can learn and they can grow academically. It's what Irving and Fraser call a warm demander, if you've heard that term. Okay. What's the last final outcome of noisy transitions beyond just parents complaining that the class lacks structure? The last one is that students, yes, the students themselves, are more likely to feel unsafe and stressed. And unfortunately, they don't tend to tell you, I feel unsafe, I feel stressed. It tends to manifest in terms of problem behavior. You tend to see spikes in aggression and in anger, and in kids excluding each other, and kids showing disrespect of not only their peers, but of other adults in the school system. So students are more likely to feel unsafe and stressed. Students in poorly managed primary grade classrooms, so grades K1-2, pre-K K1-2, demonstrate a continuation of severe aggression even into middle school, which means it doesn't just affect them that year, it continues to affect them throughout their school career if the problem behavior is not managed, if it's not intervened upon. So I'm going to ask you just to take a second and review these and think about which outcome seems the most harmful to you. If you had to just pick one, would it be that you lose instructional time during and because of noisy transitions? Would it be that there's more negative teacher-student interactions? Would it be that there's poorer administrative evaluations? Would it be that noisy transitions cause more criticism from parents, or that they cause greater student feelings of stress and anxiety? What would you say if you had to just pick one? What's interesting to me in working with teachers is that they almost always tend to say number 5, greater student feelings of stress and anxiety. And I think it's because they don't want their students to feel that way. So this is the one they pick, but number 3 is actually the one that tends to impact them the most. The number one reason teachers are let go, at least in our district, is because of poor classroom management skills. So it may not seem like poor administrative evaluations are such a big deal compared to greater student feelings of stress and anxiety, but that's the one that actually tends to impact teachers more than any of the others. So I want to tell you what Marla W. has said about this. She's a teacher with whom I worked a few years ago, fabulous kindergarten teacher. And would you just listen to her testimonial? She said, I used to think I was being too strict if I asked my kids to do something quietly, especially since they're only 5, right? Because she's a kindergarten teacher. But I've realized this year that they're actually happier and they feel, ready for this word, safer when I keep order, especially during transitions. I have less pushing, poking, falling, tattletaling, crying, and they move a lot more quickly too, so we get more done in a day. So this was a teacher who worked really, really hard on quick and quiet transitions and saw the benefit of it in a really huge way. The question then always becomes, okay, quiet transitions are so important, then how do you achieve that? How do you get kids to meet your expectations during those transitions? Let's talk about it. Let's go to the how. There's 2 phases, just like when we train classroom rules, 2 phases, the training phase and the maintenance phase. We're going to have a whole session just on maintenance, but let's talk about training for transitions. In the training phase, remember we've talked about you first have to tell students the task. And we talked last time about if you're training kids how to sit during instruction, you might say something like, we're going to learn something called power position. Do you remember what the E stood for in the TEMPO acronym? We tell students the task, the E was that we're going to explain how the behavior looks and sounds. What do you do with your body? What do you do with your mouth during this transition or during this expectation? When I ask you to get into power position, it means that you'll scoot your chair up, put your hands on top of desk, eyes on me, mouth closed. Okay, what was the M in tempo? The M stood for model the behavior, right? Let me show you what this looks like with my body. Let me show you what it sounds like with my mouth. I'm going to model for you what it looks like. Quick tip that I realized I probably should have included in last session is that teacher or peers may model a behavior. So sometimes it would be really difficult in a task like passing down papers for the teacher to show how I take the top one and then I pass the papers down and I take the top one and I pass the papers down and I'm doing it quietly the whole time. That might be unrealistic for a teacher to model that. So you could choose, for instance, the first row of a group of kids and say, we're going to watch row 1 and see how quietly and quickly they pass down papers. So I felt like I needed to say that. Okay, so we've told the task, we've explained how it looks and sounds, we've modeled the behavior. The P stood for, do you remember? Practice the behavior. Okay, we're going to try this together and I'm going to watch for kids who remember how it looks and how it sounds. We're going to practice together, and as we practice, the O stood for offer feedback, right? I'm going to tell you affirmatively and correctively how you're doing. Yep, that was great following directions, or we're actually going to try that part again. Do you remember that? So the acronym was, I guess I already told you. I guess I wasn't supposed to tell you yet. Sorry. The acronym was TEMPO. In the research, it's behavioral skills training, but TEMPO is the acronym that reminds us this is how we train an expectation. So I'm hoping you can watch this video. This is first day of first grade, and this is a video of training students to line up. And I want you to notice here, this is a 6-minute video. But can you identify evidence of each component in training this transition? Tell the task, explain looks and sounds, model behavior, practice, offer feedback. Can you identify that within training this transition to line up? We are going to walk to the lunchroom because in first grade, we get to eat lunch in the cafeteria. Raise your hand if you already knew that. Good, put your hands down. When we line up, let me show you how it's going to look. Can I use your desk for an example? Would that be okay? Do you mind just standing right there for me for a second? Mm-hmm. Thanks, dude. Perfect. Okay, in just a minute, I'm going to say, girls, would you push in your chairs and come and stand next to the counter? When I do that, Watch how I want you to move. If I were sitting in the desk, what I would do is quietly scoot back, push in my chair, and walk quietly to stand by the counter. Watch. See how quietly I did that? What I don't want to see are kids going like this. Pretend the teacher said, okay, I want you to push in your chairs, girls, and line up by the counter. Hooray, the girls get to go first! Girls rock! Yeah! First one here. That was way too loud. We do it? Way too loud. When you line up, you do it super quietly. Put your hands down for just a minute. Now I'll tell you what some kids do. Good job listening. Some kids say, ooh, if I just whisper, then Miss Smith won't think I'm talking. She won't be able to hear me. So they go like this. Pretend the teacher said, girls, please push in your chairs and line up quietly. Hooray, I get to go first. Ready. Raise your hand if you could still hear me, even though I was whispering. Ooh, good ears. Okay, hands down. When I ask you to line up, watch one. Sorry, Tate, I'm going to use your desk one more time, okay? When I ask you to line up, watch one more time what it looks like. Watch how quiet my mouth is. Pretend the teacher says, girls, would you please push in chairs and line up by the counter? And that is called gorgeous. Okay, Tate, thanks, dude. I'm going to see who of my girls is ready to follow that direction. The boys might be saying, don't we get to go? Yeah, you'll get to go in a minute, but I'm going to have the girls go first. Girls, you might not get a spot at the front. You might have to stand more in the back, and guess what? That's okay. But I want to see if you can do it quietly. They're probably going to need this space right here just to stand. Thanks. Okay. Girls, would you push in chairs and quietly come and stand by the counter? Brooklyn ready? Kaylee ready? Ashlyn, yes. London ready? Scoot up here for me, sweetie.
Can I go get my lunchbox?
I haven't called on you. You have to raise your hand if you want to say that. Stay right there. Hallie ready and Claire. Layla, Tessa, Alexa's ready and Addie. Perfect. Okay, take a scoot over. Girls, watch my hand. Take a scoot over so the boys have room because they're going to have to stand right here. Uh-oh. Boys, I didn't show you how to do it. Thumbs up if you think you already know. JD's like, oh yeah, this is easy. Todd, you think so? Okay, I'm watching them for boys who quietly push in their chairs and come to line up right here behind Todd. Perfect. Tyler ready, Wyatt and Zach are ready, Gabe standing quietly, Tate ready, Jacob, Benjamin, Abe, perfect. I love that. Look what these three did. Okay, Daniel, Finn, and Trevor didn't have a place to stand because there were already kids there. So they just walked around the desks and went and stood in the back. They didn't stomp their feet and say, hey, I wanted to stand there. Awesome. Okay, hold on. I better add a pepperoni. Good job following directions. Okay, here's your job. As we walk down the hall toward the cafeteria, I want you to go super quietly. I want you to keep your mouth closed, just like all of you are already doing. And I don't want you to touch things. I don't want you to touch the wall or the mirrors. I don't want you to touch your neighbor. I want you to keep your hands either down or folded and your mouth closed. Tessa?
Can we get our lunch?
Nope, because guess what? This isn't really lunchtime. I'm just showing you what it will look like when it is lunchtime. Good job asking. Plus, did you notice she raised her hand before she said anything? Perfect example. Thank you. Thanks for standing ready. Okay, I'm watching who goes quietly down the hall. Okay, so a lot of times after teachers watch that video, the question I get is, but Sarah, isn't 6 minutes way too long to spend lining up? I don't have 6 minutes every time we need to line up. And my answer is, not initially, no. 6 minutes is not too long. I think about when I was teaching my 15-year-old daughter to drive, the very, very first task we ever tackled was parking in a parking lot. And we went to this high school parking lot, and you guys, we spent 45 minutes just on parking, just on how to pull into a spot, how to check where you are between the lines, how to reverse out of a spot, how to move forward again. We spent 45 minutes just on parking. At this point, guess what? She's good enough at parking that we don't ever work on it. Parking at this point is just the means to an end. It's not the end itself. But initially in that training phase, yeah, we did have to spend quite a bit of time on it. And the same is true in our classroom. So the question then teachers ask is, well, how do I most effectively train expectations in other settings? For instance, the cafeteria or the hall or out at recess. And here would be my suggestion, especially if you're doing this in the first 2 weeks of school, like setting up your classroom, is that you follow the normal schedule as closely as possible, but you build in time for tempo during those transitions. So for instance, if I'm going to take my kids to lunch at noon, then maybe at 11:30, I start training them. This is how we wash hands for lunch. This is how we go into the lunchroom. This is where we take our trays. This is where we sit. This is how we dump our trays. Here's where we go after we eat. And I'm going to take them through what that looks like, but I'm going to do it as close to the actual task or transition as possible. So I want to show you a video, first day of first grade, training kids to line up from recess. And I just want you to notice that the students are trained how to complete the recess transition before they access the real recess. So this training occurs really closely to their real recess time, but would you just notice what it looks like to train the kids to complete this transition before it actually happens. When it's time to come inside from recess, you'll see me stand right here at the edge of the sidewalk. Yep, that'll work. And I'll have my whistle, and I will blow my whistle 2 times. Finn, you're turned around. Good listening. Oh, I need you quiet. You'll hear me blow my whistle 2 times, and it's going to be super loud. Listen for how loud this is going to be. Loud, isn't it? Then you'll see me raise my hand. Uh-oh, we're quiet. When I do that, you'll know it's time to come line up. And the boys will get in line right here, and the girls will get in line right here. Boys line, girls line. Can you do it? Boys line, girls line. Your job when you're in line is to stand with your hands still and your mouth closed. Wow, just like you were already doing. Holy cow. Awesome job. Okay, let's see. I'm going to give you just a practice recess. This means you're going to go play, but just for a couple seconds, because then when I blow the whistle, I'm going to see how quickly you come and line up. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Go play! Okay, I should have girls right here. I'm going to actually come this way a little bit, and boys right there. Benjamin, Todd, ready? Thank you.
But they didn't get turn.
Girls standing ready. Uh-oh. Guess what? We have to practice that again because your directions when you come to get in line are that you stand with your mouth closed and your hands still. You're not talking to other kids or pushing them or laughing. You're just standing still and quiet. Daniel, you already did that, didn't you? And Gabe? Okay, we're going to practice it again to see who can do it quickly and quietly. Pretend to go play. JD standing quietly. Layla standing quietly. Zach standing quietly, and Wyatt. Miriam, you're quiet and you're even at the back. Stay right there. Let me see. Whoa, much better. Okay, we're going to do one more practice. This time, kids who line up quickly, kids who line up quietly will get a real recess. Show me your tricky eyebrows. Ooh. Okay, this is our last practice. Go play.
Okay, stay in line and follow me.
Okay, you know what I've noticed? You've been following directions all morning. Good job, dude.
Can I play?
Thanks for asking. Oh, we're going quietly. Okay, let me check. Who is standing quietly? Who is standing with their hands still? Awesome. My class. Look at my face. Holy cow. Good job. I think every single person in this class has just earned a real recess. You may go play. Okay, so did you notice they were trained to complete the recess transition before they could access a real recess? And it's why the playground was empty. Did you notice that? The reason the playground was empty was because I took my class out before the rest of the classes went out so that I could train them. This is what it looks like to line up from recess. And in total, training that entire recess expectation and transition took 13 minutes. It was 13 minutes of me walking with the kids around the playground saying, you can play right here on this playground, but you cannot play behind these hills over here next to this fence. Nope, that area is off limits. You can play here, but we don't play here. Here's the playground. You can go down this, I started to say up the slide. You could go down the slide, but not up the slide. Here are the swings. You can swing on the swings. You can't jump out of them. It took 13 minutes in total to train what recess looks like. And I might even do it again, right? A couple of days later, to polish up some of the skills the kids might be lacking. I will give you a quick tip that is something I've had to learn the hard way, is that initial playground parameters may be helpful, especially at the beginning of the year as you're training kids to line up quickly and quietly from recess. It may be helpful to say, at first, we're only going to play on this soccer field and this playground and these swings. And I'm going to see who can line up super quickly, who can line up super quietly before I decide when I think you're ready to go play on that soccer field and that playground over there. So in other words, you may want to gradually extend how much of the playground to which your students have access contingent on their behavior and their willingness to line up quickly. And you can even do it for a single student. If the rest of your class is lining up quickly, quietly, and you have one who is still lagging, maybe that one student stays in a specific area until he or she can show you, yep, I'm ready to line up quickly and quietly just like the rest of the kids, and thereby access the same area the rest of the kids access. Here's a question teachers commonly ask is, yeah, but Sarah, what if students don't meet my expectation? What if I've been super clear and they still just aren't quite compliant? Then you'd want to require a redo. It's really, really important in the training phase to be good at redos. So important that there's a whole video devoted to this about responding to disruptions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you'd want to require a redo. So I want to show you a video of this. And what I'm hoping you can notice is that there's a redo of teacher behavior and a redo of student behavior. So at one point you will hear me say as the teacher, oh, I'm going to say that again. And this time nobody's going to call anything out when I say that. So I redo my prompt, but then the students have to redo their behavior as well. So if they don't comply, consider a redo as shown. Is have you put your water bottles where they actually go, because usually when we come in from recess, we won't actually come and have them at the rug. Actually, they'll be out in the hall, and I want to show you where they will go. Uh-oh. I didn't call on anyone. I'm going to say that again, and I want everybody to keep their mouths closed. Tessa, your mouth is closed. Tessa, your mouth is closed. In just a minute, we're going to go in the hall and I'll show you where to put your water bottles. Much better job not interrupting that time and saying anything. Thank you very much. If you have your fruit snack package, I want you to pick it up. Just like Todd, I want you to hold your water bottle in the other hand. Oh, turn. Oh, first graders, sit back down. Look at my face. Just like that, Jacob. This time, when I ask you to stand up, I want you to do it without talking. Will you be able to talk a little later? Yeah. But right now, no. Show me how your mouth should look. Nope, I didn't tell you yet. Your directions are to stand up without talking. Just like that, Ashlyn. Yep. You're not in a line. You're just going to follow me all the way out the door. Layla, perfect. Miriam, perfect. Danny and Todd in the back, perfect. Gabe, we're just going quietly. Okay, so quick review. When should you set an expectation? Well, of course, first for classroom rules, we talked about that, but secondly, anytime there's a required change in behavior. In other words, for all transitions, that's when we set an expectation, typically using the tempo framework. So last question is going to be, what did you like or learn about training behavioral expectations, especially as those expectations relate to transitions? And for me, here's what I like, and I actually don't remember what I wrote, so I'm curious to see what I liked. Yes, it's the expectations require training students what to do with their mouth and with their bodies for every single school day transition. If I want my kids to be successful with all of those transitions we talked about, I have to tell them, what are you doing with mouth? What are you doing with body? What does this look like and sound like for every part of the school day? And when am I doing that training? Immediately before the first time we actually need to do it. Okay, thus concludes the transitions session. We will talk next time about how to maintain expectations. Once you've gotten past the training phase, then how do you maintain? And that will be next time. Okay, see ya.